look, we went through a few hundred years of the Middle Ages where the incredible inquiry-based civil culture of the Greeks was just forgotten. I mean, the Greeks had determined the circumference of the earth, not only that it was round, but what its circumference was by simple measurements that were then not accepted because of dogma. So we have to, if we want to progress, we have to beware of dogma.
How did they figure out the circumference of the earth?
Oh, it's really neat. I forget it was Aristarchus. I forget which of was the Greek now. It's amazing. Well, what he said was, look, so at a certain time of day, a certain time of the year, the sun is directly overhead at 12 noon. Okay? And I can tell that by looking down a deep well, and I see the reflection of the sun exactly in that deep well. Okay? So the rays of the sun, which are coming down in the same direction towards the earth everywhere, it comes down in the deep well. But 100 miles away, the well, because the surface of the earth is curved, the well is pointing in a little bit different direction. So the sun's rays come at a slightly different angle. So on this day, I will measure that the sun is directly overhead for me, but I'll get my friend 100 miles away to measure the angle of the sun relative to the well. And that tells you that the earth is curved. And if you do the geometry, you can work out if 100 miles of the Earth's surface causes the sun's rays to suddenly be at that angle, how curved the Earth is and what the circumference of the Earth is. It's plain geometry that, in principle, any high school student could do.
But when you say 100 miles away, first of all, how are they communicating with this guy 100 miles away?
They're not immediately, but the guy writes it down, and then he takes a horse, and they come and compare notes later.
And they use a sundial to determine the time?
The sundial to determine the time, and the...
But 100 miles away, would there be a deviation at all in the time, a minute or two?
Well, but so to some accuracy, you get it wrong to some accuracy.
Right.
But they did pretty damn well. They came up with the circumference of the earth was darn close to the circumference of the earth. And so it's amazing that they use these techniques.
So they were just so confused and so curious about it all. They just tried to figure out there's got to be a way to figure this out.
Well, and they weren't forced with the dogma that the earth is flat.
Right.
As I'm told today, you were dealing with some people who are still forced with that dogma.
It's very strange. How do you feel about that in
so
2017?
It's amazing. But, nothing surprises me
Not only
anymore.
that, gravity's not real and dinosaurs aren't real.
I know. And the people who say gravity aren't real, I have a great solution.
What?
It's a
Jump
great
off
solution.
a building?
You walk out the window of the 13th floor and test your ideas. And the great thing is do it before you reproduce.
But it's a magnetism thing, they believe. It's electromagnetism or something like that sucks people down to the
Yeah, that's what they can think. So
fascinating.
Carry a magnet and look at it as what happens as you're falling to the earth.
Well, what's even more hilarious is that we talked about this before the podcast started, the Japanese weather satellite that takes a full image of the earth. Mm-hmm. What is the name of that satellite again, Jamie? It takes a full image of the earth from 22,000 miles away. People keep saying in this flat earth theory thing that there's no images of the earth in full, that they're all composites. That's not true.
It's not true.
There are images of the earth that are taken every 10 minutes by this one satellite, and they're high resolution. You can access them online anytime you want. But people see those and they want to think they're fake, but yet they believe there's an ice wall around Antarctica that you cross over and you fall to the abyss. Where's this photo of the ice wall?
Yeah, where is it? Or have they never? Well,
how does someone fly from Japan to the United States?
They don't believe that people can fly around the world. I've done it. I've done and that they're all lying. Here's another one. Have they ever thought of time zones? Why are there time zones if the Earth is flat? Why are there time zones? The only reason they should go from New York to L.A. and see, you know what? The time is different.
Leprechauns.
Do they think well, no, but they probably think it's a human invention.
Yeah,
but the sun is still shining in L.A. when it's gone down in New York, and they can call their friends and check.
Oh, yeah.
And if the Earth was flat, that wouldn't be the case. It's only the case because the Earth is curved. I mean, so those simple things should convince people. But people are willing to throw out evidence if they have a belief that's really firm. And what I said before is we have to realize the easiest person to fool is yourself. So if you're not willing to question your beliefs, especially those that you hold particularly cherished beliefs in, if you're not willing to question those, you're not gonna ever grow.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to put it, particularly cherish, because I think a lot of people do cherish these ideas, things like the Earth being flat, because it gives them some sort of information leg up on everybody. I know something that people don't know.
Or it makes them feel better about themselves.
Yes.
They may hate gays because it makes them feel better about not being gay. Or maybe they're
gay,
they're
and
gay
they're trying to hide
yeah,
it.
exactly.
Yeah,
you know,
there's
I mean,
more
you
likely
always worry
that.
about that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I mean about being believing 10 impossible things for breakfast. I don't want to make fun of people because we all do think of things to make us feel better about ourselves. It's part of being human.
The psychological pitfalls.
Yeah. And so we should be aware of those. And I have them and you have them. And I don't pretend I don't. What I do try and do is question them.
Yeah.
But we can all do that. And I understand why people believe certain things. It's not, and you can be, you know what, again, Richard Dawkins tells me about an astrophysicist he knows who during the day, studies objects in the sky and looks at galaxies or stars and measures that they're 12 billion years old or whatever. And then, but yet he goes home at night and is convinced that the Earth is 6,000 years old. So somehow he can do both. Yeah.
He knows a guy like that?
Oh, yeah. And people can, and we're all capable of believing in two mutually contradictory things at the same time. It's just the way we're built. And so,
how does this guy measure the age of these planets?
Somehow it doesn't affect his fundamental beliefs. And it's amazing. It's true because we can all believe things that are wrong. And so it doesn't mean they're stupid. It doesn't mean, because this guy's apparently a fairly accomplished astrophysicist.
It's a psychological pitfall.
But we all have
a trap.
So many people, when I talk about this, I don't want to seem pompous in the sense of saying, oh, I'm better, or scientists are better. Science is better because science helps us overcome those pitfalls.
Why do those pitfalls exist, though?
Because obviously, I would argue that they have an evolutionary purpose. That somehow if they didn't have an evolutionary purpose, then they wouldn't have been selected for, right?
Right. There does seem to be some weird inclination or some desire to expose secrets, to find secrets and to know them.
Yeah, it's nice. Well, but on the other hand, that's great. Let's exploit that.
Right.
Discovering secrets is discovering mysteries.
Right.
Discovering mysteries is what motivates to do science. So let's put it in positive light. We all want to solve puzzles. We all want to understand something, and maybe be the first one to understand it. We all want to access information maybe and make us feel special for doing it. Really, that's the reason I do science, right? It's not to save the world. It's because I really want to understand it. And it's nice to be the first person to maybe understand stuff. It's gratifying for your ego. It's and we are driven, by ego. And let's not pretend otherwise.
Right, but I think you're talking about measurable things and elements and things that you could sort of expose and explain. But what these people seem to be really obsessed with is people lying about stuff and covering up secrets about, like, the Earth being flat or chemtrails.
Yeah, they like to believe there's a conspiracy.
Yeah, conspiracies are very, very attractive.
Yeah, because and I'm not a psychologist, so what I say here is just a speculation. But the world doesn't care what you believe, and it doesn't treat you fairly, right?
Right.
And that's just a fact. The world doesn't treat me fairly, it doesn't treat you fairly, it doesn't give a damn about my well-being okay. So, hey, I'm being treated unfairly. Isn't it better for me to think that someone is actively being unfair to me than to assume it's just the way it is? Because then I can blame it. And so I tend to think conspiracy theorists tend to say, the things I don't like, there's a real reason for it. It's not an accident. It's not just haphazard. It's not anything. And I've lost my job because there's got to be a reason. There's got to be a villain. There's got to be someone making it happen. Just like the reason we burned witches, right? Because there were storms or there wasn't, there wasn't crops that year. And a lot of people say, it's an interesting historical theory, which I think seems quite plausible to me, that when Newton discovered the laws of gravity, the universal law of gravity, it contributed to the ending of the burning of witches. Why?
I thought that was a myth, the burning of witches. I thought they drowned them mostly.
Well, they hung a lot of them, too.
Yeah.
They drowned them. I don't care whether it's burning. They killed them.
I understand.
Okay, they blamed crops. They blamed bad things. And then when Newton discovered that even the planets are affected by the same laws that an apple is, there's a universal laws, it meant that physical effects had physical causes. And when bad things happen, there's a physical reason. There's not someone you can blame, and witches or whatever. And so there's a lot of arguments that suggest that kind of development in physics led to the end of blaming people for bad crops or for bad things happening. But I think that's the kind of thing when we want to find someone to blame, rather than just saying the universe doesn't give a shit about me.
And anybody interested in this is a really fascinating subject, but the whole Salem witch trial thing, there's a lot of really convincing evidence that seems to point towards ergot poisoning, that there was a late freeze and that this particular type of fungus grew on some of their wheat that makes ergot, which is has very LSD-like properties, and they think these people thought they were being bewitched because they're being contaminated.
It's a great idea. Again, I don't know the evidence for it, but it's an interesting idea.
It is fascinating.
But let's understand. I think behind that is we've all had. I mean, I think what we're seeing are extremes of characteristics that we all have. I think many of us assign blame when we shouldn't. When I lose my keys, sometimes I say to my wife, where did you put the keys, right? And then I learn very quickly that I shouldn't have said that. and so I think it's just it's a characteristic of being human, and accepting it as a characteristic of being human doesn't diminish us. But what's really great is we can understand that and try and work and try and figure out ways to avoid those pitfalls.
So a lot of these the ways of thinking, these patterns of thinking, these are sort of hold-offs from the ancient days. That's the things that helped us to survive. Those pathways
are now
still
counterproductive. I ran a meeting at my Origins project at ASU about the origins of xenophobia, and us versus them. And it turns out there's really useful evolutionary purposes for us versus them, tribal purposes, and not just that. Right. Actually, it goes back to biochemistry. Immune systems is us versus them.
Right.
Just being able to recognize foreign bodies and cells. So it goes back to single cell organisms.
Wow.
But then the question is it now got is it now
run its course and become counterproductive?
Be counterproductive, exactly.
Yeah.
And then we have to look at those things and ask what there is. And if we explore those things, then there's a better chance that we can deal with them and ask what's useful and what isn't. But if we refuse to acknowledge that those things exist and that they may be the purpose of our religion or our beliefs or whatever, then we can't possibly overcome them.